Apple's rise has gone hand in hand with China's manufacturing boom. From the early 2000s to today, Apple has poured resources into Chinese factories and suppliers, spawning a vast local supply chain. In turn, Chinese consumers have become a vital market, accounting for roughly 1/5 of Apple's sales. But how did this even start? To understand that, let's have a brief overview of Apple's history in China. Apple's China story began with manufacturing. In 1999, Apple chose Taiwan's Foxconn, Honhai Precision Industry, as its assembly partner, starting with iMacs and later iPods. By leveraging Foxconn's Chinese factories, Apple's production exploded. Nearly all iPhones are still assembled in China. Over the 2000s and 2010, Apple steadily spread production. Foxconn's giant plants in Zhengzhou, Shenzhen, and elsewhere, plus other assemblers like Pegatron, Wistron, and Luxshare, made China the world's iPhone factory. By 2020, Apple's Chinese operations were enormous. Foxconn alone once employed over 1.2 million workers in China. Its workforce has since scaled with automation and assembled well over half of global iPhones. Apple's own investment in these factories is indirect, via contracts, but it has deployed capital in related areas. For example, Apple committed to building Chinese R&D centers and supporting local component makers. In 2017 to 18, Apple announced 4 new R&D centers: Beijing, Shenzhen, Shanghai, Suzhou, costing 3.5 billion RMB, 509 million. These centers create high-tech jobs, 1,000 plus researchers, and help local suppliers learn Apple's designs. In fact, Apple taught many Chinese firms how to make its parts. By insisting on strict quality and design standards, Apple helped raise the bar across China's electronics industry. Federal Reserve economist Yi Wen notes Apple's strategy spearheaded the development of the world's most sophisticated manufacturing supply chain in China. Chinese suppliers, from case makers to camera module factories, grew rapidly under Apple's mentorship. Homegrown companies like Luxshare and BYD gradually took over roles once dominated by Taiwanese firms, and even high-tech component suppliers emerged, e.g. YMTC memory chips, or state-owned firms like Sanan Optoelectronics for LEDs. According to Nikkei, Asia's analysis, about 84% of Apple's top 187 suppliers now have facilities in China, up from around 50% a few years ago. In short, Apple built a huge manufacturing ecosystem. Chinese firms now make key parts, screens, chips, casings, etc., and assemble most Apple products. Apple's presence boosted Chinese exports too. Almost all finished iPhones, over 200 million per year, ship from China to global markets, contributing billions to China's trade. Notably, China's customs statistics famously show a huge discrepancy, largely explained by Apple's iPhone assembly, between reported exports and actual foreign earnings. In return, Apple's contract costs, paid to Chinese factories, became a steady inflow of foreign revenue into China's tech hubs. In aggregate, Apple's Chinese factories and their subcontractors generate on the order of hundreds of billions of dollars in export value annually. Apple's relationship with China isn't just contract manufacturing. It also involves direct investments and formal commitments. In 2016, when its sales flagged, Apple CEO Tim Cook reportedly signed a secret 5-year deal pledging up to $275 billion of investment in China. This pact, though widely reported, is difficult to verify in full, but it signaled Apple's willingness to inject capital into China's tech sector. For instance, as part of that agreement, Apple invested $1 billion in Chinese ride-sharing firm Didi, a politically delicate move. Apple has also funded clean energy and manufacturing projects in China. It has invested in renewable energy for Chinese Apple suppliers and committed to carbon-neutral factories. By 2024, Apple's tangible investments in China included the aforementioned R&D centers, 3.5 billion RMB, several large data center projects, and dozens of corporate subsidiaries. Apple had set up 9 companies in China, with 71 branch offices. The company employs people directly, 13,600 staff by end 2018, mostly in retail and offices, and funds local projects. Above all, Apple's jobs impact has been massive. Apple itself claims it supports over 5 million jobs in China. This figure, frequently cited by CEO Cook and Chinese state media, includes factory workers at Foxconn and other assemblers, employees of parts suppliers, third-party app developers on Apple's App Store, and even retail staff. To put this in perspective, that's roughly twice the number of jobs Apple supports in the US. In manufacturing alone, Foxconn's China workforce, over 1 million, accounted for a large share of these jobs. On top of that, Apple's retail expansion has directly hired thousands of Chinese sales staff. Apple's investments also paid dividends in profits. China has been one of Apple's most profitable regions. In fiscal 2023, Greater China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, generated $30.3 billion of operating profit on $72.6 billion sales. Even as currency swings trimmed recent growth, Greater China's operating income in 2024 was still about $27.1 billion. By comparison, Apple's entire global operating profit in 2024 was about $114.3 billion. So China alone delivered roughly a quarter of Apple's operating profit. For fiscal year 2024, China sales were 17% of revenue, but at higher margins. These profits largely stay with Apple, but they underscore how lucrative the Chinese business has been. To tap China's vast consumer base, Apple has built a retail empire. In 2008, Apple opened its first China store, Sanlitun, Beijing, and thereafter it quietly rolled out stores in Shanghai, Guangzhou, and other cities. By the end of 2018, Apple had 51 Apple stores on the Chinese mainland. This number rose steadily. By January 2025, Apple's own newsroom and media reports noted the count had reached 58 stores, including new flagships in Shanghai and Hefei. These stores often employ 70 to 100 people each and serve millions of customers annually. Each store is designed to appeal to Chinese shoppers with local language services, financing options, and trade-in programs. Apple also sells through authorized resellers and online channels, but its own stores remain prestige showrooms in major cities. iPhones, MacBooks, and AirPods are status symbols among China's growing middle class. In recent years, iPhone sales in China have sometimes grown faster than in mature markets. For example, Apple's fiscal Q3 2023 sales actually increased year over year in Greater China, unlike in the US. However, competition is also fierce. By 2024, Apple's market share slipped amid a smartphone glut. Research firm Canalys reports Apple's China iPhone shipments fell 17% in 2024. Apple was overtaken as China's top smartphone brand, dropping to approximately 15% market share. Behind Vivo, approximately 17%, and Huawei, approximately 16%. In the fourth quarter of 2024 alone, iPhone sales plunged 25% amid the holiday season. Still, Apple remains a major player. It leads the high-end segment, average selling prices above Chinese rivals, and retains a loyal customer base. Despite recent sales dips, China's size keeps it vital. In the fourth quarter of 2024, Chinese sales were enough that Greater China still contributed nearly a fifth of Apple's quarterly revenue. Apple continues to tweak its China strategy, launching trade-in and installment programs, localizing content services, and even pioneering country-specific features to sustain demand. Chinese consumers also drive Apple's services, App Store, iCloud growth. Apple reported 5 million iOS app developers in China as of 2022, illustrating the sprawling Apple economy among Chinese tech firms and entrepreneurs. Over the past 2 decades, Apple has become deeply entwined with China's economy. Its massive manufacturing presence, anchored by Foxconn's plants, helped turn China into the world's high-tech export powerhouse. In return, Chinese industry climbed the value chain, and millions of Chinese workers found employment building and serving Apple products. Apple's operations in China, factories, investments, R&D labs, stores, and a huge local developer base, remain a pillar of its global strategy. By 2025, Apple's China story is one of symbiosis. Apple gets low-cost scale and a huge market, while China gains high-tech skills, exports, and jobs. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.